Welcome back to Stream History. Today, we are diving into one of the most chaotic, bizarre, and constitution-defining periods in American history. The year is 1841. The United States has just inaugurated William Henry Harrison, the candidate of the newly formed Whig Party. Harrison rode a wave of Tippecanoe and Tyler II campaign fervor into the White House. He was swept into office with a mandate for change, promising to reverse the Jacksonian era of executive dominance and return power to Congress. But destiny, history, and a severe case of pneumonia had other plans. Just 31 days into his presidency, William Henry Harrison died, becoming the first American president to pass away while in office. The nation was plunged into an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The death of a president was a scenario the Founding Fathers had vaguely touched upon, but never actually experienced. The Founding Fathers had outlined in Article 2 of the Constitution that the powers and duties of the office shall devolve on the vice president, but a critical linguistic ambiguity remained. Did the office itself transfer, or just the powers and duties while the vice president remained a glorified acting president? This was the crux of the constitutional panic. Congress assumed they could treat Vice President John Tyler as merely a caretaker, an acting president, or a vice president acting as president. Many in Washington, especially the powerful Whig leadership led by Senator Henry Clay of Kentucky, feared John Tyler. Tyler was a former Democrat who had only joined the Whig ticket to appeal to Southern states' rights voters. The Whigs didn't want him dictating the national agenda. They wanted to control the presidency themselves, relegating Tyler to a figurehead. But John Tyler had absolutely no intention of being a placeholder. He was in Williamsburg when news of Harrison's death reached him. He immediately hurried to Washington and made a bold, decisive move. Instead of waiting for Congress to clarify his title or allow him to take a secondary oath, Tyler stepped forward and took the constitutional oath of office. He declared himself the President of the United States in his own right, establishing the precedent that a vice president succeeding to the highest office becomes the president with full powers, not merely an interim executive. While this bold constitutional step ultimately saved the republic from years of succession squabbles, a precedent later codified in the 25th Amendment, it immediately infuriated the political establishment. Political opponents, outraged by his usurpation of full executive authority, mocked him with the enduring nickname, his Accidency. This assumption of power set the stage for an administration that refused to play by the traditional rules of party discipline or legislative deference. Tyler's aggressive seizure of power made it clear. He was the captain of the ship, and he intended to steer it his way. Tyler's early grasp on power set a defiant, independent tone. He possessed an almost religious devotion to strict constructionism, the belief that the federal government could only do exactly what the Constitution explicitly allowed. He did not believe in a strong central government, national banks, or federally funded infrastructure. This philosophy put him on an inevitable collision course with the very party that had put him in power. By refusing to accept a secondary, weakened role, Tyler essentially declared war on the Whig congressional majority. This unilateral assertion of presidential power was the first domino to fall, leading directly to the unprecedented threat of presidential impeachment. To understand why John Tyler became the most despised man in his own party, we have to look at the Whig Party's political platform. The Whigs, spearheaded by the brilliant orator and politician Henry Clay, believe in what they called the American system. This was a vision of a robust federal government that would stimulate the economy through protective tariffs, federally funded internal improvements like roads and canals, and, most importantly, the reestablishment of a national bank. The Whigs viewed a centralized banking system as absolutely essential to stabilizing the national currency and promoting economic growth. During the 1840 election, the Whigs ran on this exact platform. They campaigned vigorously against the Jacksonian Democrats' dismantling of the Bank of the United States. When Harrison died, the Whigs assumed they had a clear path to enacting this economic agenda. They drafted a bill to create a new fiscal bank of the United States, designed to operate across the country. The bill passed through Congress, and it was sent to President John Tyler's desk for his signature. This is where the grand Whig vision hit a brick wall. John Tyler had historically opposed a national bank. His strict interpretation of the Constitution led him to believe that a federally chartered bank operating within the states was fundamentally unconstitutional and an overreach of federal power. Despite immense pressure from his cabinet and Whig leadership, Tyler did the unthinkable. He used his veto power and struck down the bank bill. The Whigs in Congress were absolutely stunned. They had won the election, they controlled the legislature, and their own president was shooting down their core legislative priority. In an attempt to compromise, Henry Clay and congressional Whigs drafted a second bill, a fiscal corporation bill, designed specifically to address the constitutional concerns Tyler had outlined in his first veto message. They thought they had given the president exactly what he wanted. But incredibly, Tyler vetoed this second bank bill as well. Tyler's second bank veto was the spark that set Washington on fire, literally. The backlash to Tyler's refusal to sign the banking bills was immediate and violent. The Whig leadership felt completely betrayed. They had placed Tyler on the ticket merely to secure Southern votes, not to have him actively dismantle the party's foundational principles. Following the second veto, an angry, drunken mob gathered outside the White House. This wasn't a peaceful protest, it was a riot. The crowd fired guns into the air and hung John Tyler in effigy right in front of the executive mansion. Members of the president's family feared for their lives, and the president himself was virtually unprotected. It was one of the ugliest, most violent demonstrations ever to occur at the White House. The mob was so threatening that Congress was forced to expand the small security force in the District of Columbia to patrol the city at night. While the public took to rioting, the political establishment took to mass resignation. The day after the second bank veto, Tyler's entire cabinet, with the exception of Secretary of State Daniel Webster, submitted their resignations at the exact same time. This was an orchestrated, tactical maneuver designed to completely cripple the president's administration and force John Tyler to resign in disgrace. The outgoing cabinet members, many of whom were fiercely loyal to Henry Clay, wanted to leave Tyler isolated, powerless, and unable to govern. They believed that by abandoning him, they could force him to step down and hand the presidency over to the Whig leadership in the Senate. However, they profoundly miscalculated Tyler's iron will. Instead of caving to the pressure, Tyler stood his ground. He did not panic. He simply accepted their resignations, essentially stating that he never wanted them in his cabinet anyway, and that he was entirely capable of appointing men who agreed with his vision. This mass walkout meant to destroy his presidency, instead fostered a deep, defiant aggression in Tyler. The final blow came just 2 days after the cabinet resignations. The congressional Whigs gathered and published a manifesto declaring John Tyler a traitor to the cause. In this official declaration, published in newspapers across the country, the Whig Party formally expelled the President of the United States from their ranks. John Tyler was now a man without a political party. He had left the Democratic Party years prior due to his opposition to Andrew Jackson, and now he was kicked out of the Whig Party. He had no loyal base in Congress, no cabinet, and no popular mandate from the people. He was politically orphaned. Yet, this total alienation did not make Tyler cautious. It made him dangerous in the eyes of his political enemies. It freed him from the constraints of party politics, allowing him to wield executive power with a heavy hand, paving the way for a major constitutional showdown. Once John Tyler was expelled from the Whig Party, his relationship with Congress deteriorated rapidly. He was no longer a president working with a legislative majority. He was an isolated executive at war with the legislature. The Whigs, still controlling both the House and the Senate, attempted to pass various pieces of legislation, including bills to raise tariffs and distribute revenue from land sales to the states. True to his states' rights, strict constructionist philosophy, Tyler repeatedly deployed his veto power. In total, Tyler used the veto power 10 times during his presidency, a significant number for that era. He used the veto as a direct weapon to paralyze a Congress he firmly believed was overstepping the boundaries of the Constitution and trampling on states' rights. To the Whigs, this was an abuse of power. The legislative branch believed that they, as the direct representatives of the people, embodied the true will of the nation. When Tyler used the veto, he was effectively nullifying the work of hundreds of elected representatives. The Whigs argued that Tyler was using his one-man rule to obstruct the public will and protect his own personal, eccentric ideologies. By the summer of 1842, the frustration in the House of Representatives reached a boiling point. Congress passed a high tariff bill, which was heavily favored by northern manufacturing interests. President Tyler, viewing the tariff as unconstitutional because it combined protectionist measures with revenue collection, promptly vetoed it. The House erupted. They realized that John Tyler was systematically thwarting their entire legislative agenda. Tempers flared, and floor debates became incredibly heated. Lawmakers openly declared that the president had placed the legislative and executive branches in a state of civil war. They felt that Tyler was treating Congress not as an equal branch of government, but as a subordinate entity that existed merely to rubber stamp his decrees. The resentment wasn't just about policy, it was about power. The Founding Fathers had designed the Constitution with a system of checks and balances, but the Whigs argued that Tyler was turning this system on its head. By vetoing bill after bill, Tyler was concentrating supreme power into the hands of the executive, transforming the presidency into a tool of tyranny. The House members felt increasingly helpless, realizing that no matter what laws they passed, the president would simply strangle them with his veto pen. The debate transcended the specific issues of banks and tariffs. It touched upon a fundamental fear deeply ingrained in the American political psyche. Coming so soon after the Revolution, Americans had an inherent fear of autocratic, one-man rule. Many in the House and the Senate began to voice fears that John Tyler was setting a perilous precedent. They worried that by using the veto so liberally to force his will upon the nation, Tyler was paving the way for future presidents to act like monarchs rather than public servants. To the Whigs, John Tyler represented a dangerous deviation from Republican values. They viewed him as a usurper who had hijacked the presidency and was subverting the democratic process. This widespread anxiety that the executive branch was becoming too powerful and that the president was acting above the law created an explosive atmosphere in Washington. The stage was set for an unprecedented constitutional confrontation, an attempt to remove the president not through an election, but through the extreme and untested mechanism of impeachment. In the summer of 1842, the outrage within the House of Representatives reached the point of no return. It was during this period of intense legislative warfare that a fierce, outspoken Whig congressman from Virginia named John Minor Botts took the floor to strike a historic blow. Representative John Minor Botts was a staunch Whig, a fellow Virginian, and one of Tyler's most bitter political rivals. On July 22, 1842, Botts took the historic step of introducing the very first formal resolution in the history of the House of Representatives aimed at impeaching a president of the United States. Botts presented a resolution demanding that John Tyler, the acting president of the United States, resign his office immediately or face impeachment. This was a watershed moment in American history, marking the first time such a process was proposed for a sitting president. The resolution, discussed in the Congressional Globe, detailed accusations of constitutional overreach against Tyler. Key allegations included the abuse of the veto power to obstruct vital legislation and an assertion of executive authority, described by critics as a one-man rule. While the House initially tabled the motion, it formally introduced the prospect of impeachment, charging that Tyler's actions, including the veto of the fiscal bank bill, constituted an abuse of power. Following this, a select committee chaired by former President John Quincy Adams issued a report strongly condemning Tyler's frequent use of the veto to, in their view, stifle the legislative process. The committee's findings argued that this conduct was damaging to the balance of power. Despite these criticisms and a House vote endorsing the report's disapproval, a direct push for removal failed, allowing Tyler to finish his term. John Tyler managed to survive the impeachment attempt, but his presidency was when the American Civil War broke out decades later. Tyler's deep-seated belief yet, despite his controversial life and tragic end, his accidency left, and furthermore, the furious battle between Tyler and Congress defined the boundaries of thank you for watching this deep dive into America's very first impeachment crisis here on Stream History. If you found this look into John Tyler's chaotic presidency fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring more hidden chapters of history to light. What do you think? Was John Tyler a brave defender of the